reading from Psalm 37, verses 1 to 11. Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity. For they shall soon be cut down like the grass, and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good, so shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thy heart. Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. And he shall bring forth thy righteousness as thy light, and thy judgment as thy noonday. Rest in the Lord, and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Cease from anger, and forsake wrath. Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil, for evildoers shall be cut off, but those that wait upon the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. For yet a little while, and the wicked shall not be, yea, thou shalt diligently consider his place, and it shall not be. But the meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight thyself in the abundance of peace. This is the word of the Lord.
Good evening, everyone. Hearing that song really brought back a lot of memories. That was my mother's favorite song. I think Steve remembered. So I'm sitting there and I could picture my mother saying that to us. So thank you for that. To talk about my brother, first I'm going to give you some factual information. Some of it you've heard already tonight, because really my brother is a man for the community. Just to give you some background, Steve Wrensford is from Middle Island and has always resided in Constituency number 4, but for a period in January 1986 until April 1996 when he resided in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. Steve has always been community conscious and community oriented and has never relinquished those ideals. He attended both the St. Paul's All-Age and the Virchild's All-Age School. He then attended the Bastia Junior High School on Burden Street. After leaving school, Steve worked as a substitute teacher at Sandy Point Primary School. He also worked briefly at the electricity department and was then moved to NACO, the National Agricultural Corporation, in 1974, where he worked until 1985, when he was terminated by Michael Oliver Powell of the PAM NRP government. Steve was terminated for exercising his right to freedom of speech and freedom of association. Now, back then, those were not popular terms, but that's, in a sense, what happened. Mr. Wrensford has, to his credit, the organizing within the constituency some of the more impactful events to be held in our community. Some of you would have heard of the MI City Festival, which made our community come to life during the month of February each year, even when it was snubbed by our then parliamentarian representative, Constance Mitchum, in 1985. That festival was the brainchild of Mr. Wrensford, who invested his heart, finances, and sweat equity to ensure our community received a quality event. The MI City Festival has been the only community festival to boast of producing a father and 2 sons in the same calypso competition in the Federation. One of those sons has gone on to become the famous Mr. World of Small Axe fame. Even small acts which evolved from vibrational roots gained their foothold via the festival by playing alongside GI Brass International and Elimac and the GI Brass. I myself remember those discussions where Steve would insist that vibrational roots be promoted and receive equal playtime as the then more popular town bands. Now, we all know how that turned out, because now we have the sweetest band in the world. And that's how impactful MI City Festival was. So that you get the measure of this outstanding son of MI City, another notable impactful implementation of his organizational skills was demonstrated in the organization and formation of the St. Thomas Trinity Football League, which he organized in 1980. By the second year of its conception, the league, which spanned halfway tree to Boys West Farm, boasted 14 teams in a senior league and 5 teams in a youth league. This feat was never accomplished by any other president of the league after that. Steve ran the league until 1985, when politics inserted itself into the league. That did not daunt Steve. For every summer during his sojourn in a foreign land, he would bring a team or teams for friendly competition of soccer and or cricket against representative teams of our area. Steve never forgot his community wherever he went. My brother's advent into politics came around 1968 when he joined Young Labour. 10th June 1967 was still buzzing and fresh on the minds in our community especially. This is where mercenary fellboats came ashore in an attempt to overthrow the Labour government of Sir Robert Llewellyn Bratcher. Now, it's popular around this time to talk about fake news. When I was growing up, I saw a lot of fake news in the Democrat because they tried to convince people it didn't exist. But everybody in my village knew it happened because they knew and saw. The Steve was not yet a teenager, but his convictions were of such magnitude that he enlisted the aid of his oldest sister and brother to facilitate his attendance to the Young Labour meetings. Steve and his siblings would walk to Old Road on a Friday afternoon for a meeting starting at 6, and then walk home around 8 or 9 at night. Attendance was consistent, demonstrating the family's commitment to the Labour cause. During this time, Sir Lee Llewellyn Moore had recently returned from studies in England and was head of Young Labour. Sir Lee then went on to replace Paul Southwell as our sitting Member of Parliament. Steve went on to become Constituency number 4 Young Labour President in 1980 and de facto Chairman of Constituency 4 Labour Branch that same year, a distinction he held until his departure to pursue his studies in 1986. When he returned in 1996, he was again thrust into the chairmanship of Constituency 4 Labour Branch until he relinquished that position in 1998. Those who were part of his tenure as Young Labour President can attest to the robust activities that demonstrated his fearless belief in empowering oneself and identifying and showing allegiance to one's belief. Steve was once described by a colleague as being a stealth bomber, as many are lulled into a belief that he's toothless, only to find they were on the wrong side too late. The effect of his interaction would be felt many years later. Whilst residing in St. Thomas, Steve attended the University of the Virgin Islands, graduating with a bachelor's degree in accounting and management. He then went on to complete a master's in business administration. During that same period, Steve organized a football club comprising players from Challengers to Halfway who were also living in St. Thomas. This club was called the MI Rockmasters. The Rockmasters, as they were affectionately called, immediately dominated the St. Thomas League, becoming champions within 3 years. Steve became president of the St. Thomas Football Association and moved for reforms within that organization. During his tenure, Steve was also captain of the UVI cricket team, secretary of the St. Thomas Cricket Association, and a member of the Leeward Island Football Association. During this time, he was also father and mother to his 5 children that lived with him in St. Thomas and attended school there. To put it into perspective, Steve worked full-time at a restaurant on St. John, attended University of the Virgin Islands full-time, and was raising his kids. And oh yeah, during that time, he also started his own business. In 1996, he was asked to return home to help with the development of the Federation. Being the person that he is and having a selfless love for his country, without hesitation, Steve returned and took a position at Social Security, where he served until 2017. He was recently honored at Social Security's gala for his impeccable years of service. In preparing to give this speech, I got some factual information from the man himself. But as you've heard before, my brother is humble and modest. So I'm going to mention some things that I remember and observances I have made over the years. Perhaps one of the most telling traits that I admire about Steve is not allowing political affiliation to affect his interaction with the community. One of my earliest memories of Steve is passing by his house on Lambert's Road, and there he was on his landing, tutoring several people for their GCE levels. In attendance were well-known supporters of the PAM party, and there was my brother helping. He identified a need and saw a way to help his community, and it didn't matter to him who showed up, PAM or Labor. Similarly, in organizing the MI City Festival, Steve made a concerted effort to ensure that the whole community was involved. This man canvassed the young men, PAM or Labor, and got them to clean up the 4-H plot and transform it into Festival City. You see, for Steve, community is everything, and political affiliation should not hinder love for or contribution to community. In the summer of 1985, on the same day, a Wednesday, I remember it, my family was dealt a decisive blow by the PAM government. Both my brothers were summarily dismissed by the PAM government on the same day at the same time. That's how orchestrated it was. My brother Ivor came to our mother's house with his letter first. Then shortly after, Steve came with his letter. Ivor worked at Lambert's, Steve worked in town. All sorts of officials from the Labour Party came to our house that afternoon and evening. And finally, when it was just the family, I recall Steve saying to my mother, "Mom, this can't stop me." And it didn't. He continued with his community involvement. He obtained his degrees, and even though he lived in St. Thomas, he returned to campaign for every election. When the popular chant was "Labour dead," Steve stood like a rose in the desert, never fading, never abandoning the Labour movement. That's how strong his conviction is. That's his dedication. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my immense pleasure to give you Mr. Clyde Steve Wrensford, my brother, my father figure, the man who taught me to follow the rules, to stand with conviction for your belief and your values, to not compromise your character for the easy route, to be loyal, and to always give back to the community. I give you the man from 4, living in number 4, works for 4. We say things are better with Labour. Steve Wrensford makes